All right, good evening, everybody. It is 6:01, Thursday, January 11th, and at this time, I'd like to call our special board meeting to order. Welcome, everybody who's here participating in the audience. Ms. Schulp, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Tia Johnson. Present. Brian Nichols.
Here.
Brian Anderson.
Here.
Greg Schneider.
Present.
Amy Levy.
Here.
Megan Miller.
Present.
And Sean Levy. Sean is not here as of yet. So all members are present except Sean Levy.
Thank you so much. At this time, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by board member Schneider, second by board member Levy. Any discussion on the agenda? All right, hearing none, all in favor of passing our agenda as posted, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so at this time that takes us to section 2, which is action and discussion items, and I'd like to please turn it over now to Dr. Garrison. Thank you.
So thank you so much for actually being here with us tonight. One of the things that we're going to talk about is actually this referendum language development. And there's a series of thoughts that we will kind of work our way through, similar to last year. Unlike a little bit different from last year is that, we had an ad hoc committee and, we had committee information. And of course, we brought that committee information to the board. The board heard all that information. This time around, we had a community survey. And so to, make sure that this is something that everyone has the opportunity to kind of review, I did want to make sure that I was able to share this information again publicly with the people who weren't able to be in our meeting last week on Wednesday, Wednesday? Last week, Wednesday, correct. And so I'm gonna do a real high level overview of the community survey that did go out. This is just for context again, more so for the board, but also for our listeners. Of course, we had a school perception survey that went out. It went out kind of in the middle of November, and from the middle of November to December the 29th. We had about 1,752 respondents total in that conversation. As School Perceptions did mention to us, they did have about 12% response rate. This is typical for the size district that we have, and so that's something that the School Perceptions did mention in their conversation. There's a statistical margin of error of 2.39%. Again, that's also typical with our size and our respondents. And so that's something that I also want everyone to, kindly be aware of. And again, high level overview to people who took the survey, of course, 65 or higher was our highest percentage in the school, and in the city of Beloit that took the survey, followed by 45 to 54. And then, of course, you see that as so forth. Primary residents, yes, 86% that took the survey were primary residents. And then, of course, 13% was no. I'm considering that portion to be probably from the staff. And then, of course, 1% was not sure. We had, from a municipality perspective, 92% lived in the city of Beloit, 6% town of Turtle, and then, of course, town of Beloit, and then 2% town of Turtle. I wanted to make sure that, again, as we kind of review this information, respondents, as you can tell, mostly were, are you an employee of the school district? 23% said yes, other was no. And then you have children attending the school district, 18% yes, 82% no. And of course, board, if you had any questions, again, this is just a review from last week, Wednesday. Do you have any children or younger in the school? Do you have any children younger than school age? 92% said no, 8% said yes. Of course, in the survey, there's just, information that we was also able to share. And in that share, I'm going to make it a little bigger there. In that survey, we talked about some of our financial situations here in the school district. And one of the things that is noted across the board is that we do have some financial challenges that will be facing us here in the near future. That is why the board did go to resolution back in September, October, I believe. And I believe we have positioned ourselves to continue the conversation for referenda here in our school district. From a mill rate perspective, as you can see, we're the purple group. We're at 478 this year. I'm sorry, 478 was where we were at last year. And of course, we dropped down to 396 this year. It's important to note that 70% of school districts in Wisconsin have secured funding through an operational referenda. And so it's not unlikely this is not a new conversation in the state of Wisconsin, because again, to secure funds that's needed for our school district, we have to really hone in on how we can actually get those funds. And operational referendum is one of them. Of course, we did go to referendum last year, and we'll talk a little bit about that in my next conversation. So on the survey, what you saw was three options. You saw a $9 million option that pretty much brought us to 611 on the tax mill rate. We saw a $11 million option, which brought us to 684. And then we also saw a $12.8 million option, which brought us to 7.49. It's very important that we note that each level of request gave us just a little more as it pertains to what we could do if the funds were rendered. It's very important to note that. And so $9 million would give us the balance, not the balance conversation, to give us the consistent conversation, but there will still have to be some budgetary concerns and some cuts that we may have to make. The $11 million will give us a little more opportunity. And then, of course, that $12.8 million will give us the most opportunity to expand our needs here in the school district. And so this slide here really captures what the surveys gave us back from an informational perspective. And option one was that $9 million conversation, so a little over 51% said they would be in favor of that conversation. Option two, 44%, that's the $11 million conversation. And then option three was the $12.8 million opportunity, and under 27%, 27.8% said yes to that option. And so it's very important that we note that this is of the people who shared their responses, all right? We know that there's many people that, for whatever reasons, weren't able to, finish the survey. Mm-hmm. However, this is what we have for community-wide data, which is, again, very important to our conversation. So right now, as it stands, 91%, option one at the $9 million number is the number in which we have the most support for in this operational referenda. Now, the next big part of the question is, one of the things that I didn't want to do was not share with people what other possibilities that we would need to look at in case we didn't make in case the referendum didn't pass. And this was a wide open question that allowed everyone to kind of weigh in on what it would be that they would like to see a cost cutting option in. And as you can tell, with 5.5 being the median score across the board, whether you're a staff, parent and caregiver, or a non-parent and non-staff, people don't want to make cuts in these areas. Outside of the delay in curriculum updates, everything fell below the 5.5 as a median. And so this slide says a lot. Okay, this slide says a lot. And, one could argue, what does it mean and how, what's the feeling around it? It really says that our district wants to keep the things that we have in place and at the tune of this number, which looks like $9 million based off of the survey respondents. Okay. And that's the high level overview of the survey. All right. And I'll pause right there to see if there's any questions about the survey.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. So are we concerned at all, or I'm kind of curious what the take is. I'm glad to hear that the 12% response rate is standard for a district of our size. I was looking at the demographic that seems to be the majority of, although there's not a clear majority, like most of the highest responding age demographic, that's what I'm trying to say, was 65 or higher. Mm-hmm. Does that skew or impact how we should be reading the response data, given what we know about people who are likely to vote in the referendum, is kind of my question.
And so, one of the things that's hard to say is who's going to come out and vote on a specific election. I wish I could say that, more people will come out and vote, but, typically in the city of Beloit, the people who are going to come out and vote are the people that's going to come out and vote. And I wish I can say these are the people that's going to come out and vote. What we will say is, based off of this survey, I believe Mr. Demuse did mention that the people who took this survey would typically be people who come out and vote. Okay, if they took the time to do the survey, possibly they'll be the people that come out and vote. And again, these are all hypotheticals, right? We don't know, it's easy to put a survey in the mailbox, but there's another thing to actually go to the polls and actually, and have to vote. And so speculate around who is going to come out and vote, but the 65 and higher was the group that participated the most in this survey. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No problem. And so are there any other questions? And I know we kind of went over this last week as well, but I just want to make sure I was able to, capture any of your questions before we proceed. All right. Well, Ian, that's the high-level overview. I didn't want to spend as much time as Mr. Demuse did last week, but again, this information is on the website, as well as another recap of kind of where we are right now. Give me a quick moment to pull up the other other part in which we'll kind of venture into, which is our operational referenda considerations. And so, actually, you don't see that tab yet. Give me 1 second. Here, stop sharing for 1 second, and then I'm going to come back to sharing. All right. And so in this conversation, I will have Mr. Chady and myself will kind of walk us through kind of where we are today. Last year, this was a portion of the referendum opportunity where we had, a little more time to dive into the information. Again, the survey gave us that information and not an ad hoc committee. And so we were able to kind of capture everything that we needed to capture in that conversation. But before I go into this presentation here, I do want to note that we did have other community listening sessions. We had to cancel the one in which we had a snow day here on Tuesday of this past week. We will have to reschedule that opportunity at the library after this conversation. Of course, it's just the time frame in which we had. Yesterday, we did have a board meeting. Of course, we're here tonight again with another board meeting. So I just didn't have that space to go back to the library to have another conversation to capture, additional thoughts. I will say of the ones that we have done, the conversations were overall, pretty impactful. I don't want to say that the conversations weren't all leaning towards a yes or all leaning towards a no. I believe that the conversations were mostly centered around, the conversation was mostly centered around getting the information. And my job has always been to make sure people have the information to make an informed decision at the polls. Now, we know that there may be some people that will support this, and we may even know that some people that may not support this. But it is my responsibility to make sure that the information is there so people can make an informed decision at the polls. And so that was my goal in all of the community listening sessions. We did have 4, supposed to have 5 over this, but again, this past one we had to cancel. We, of course, also fielded questions throughout. Mr. Chady fielded questions throughout. Mr. Christopher fielded questions throughout. My cabinet fielded questions throughout. And so that was also very positive along the way this time around, because we didn't, have this one specific group doing X. We had anyone can come and hear, anyone can share what their thoughts were as it pertains to our last referendum, to this referendum. And that was very important to just kind of note. So that's something I want to just kind of bring us up to speed of kind of around the conversation that did happen up to where we are today. So now I'm gonna roll right into the operational referendum considerations. And this portion of the conversation will be really centered around, you know, kind of what we want to see, or what do the board want to see in our next steps here. If I can get it to advance the slide. Give me 1 second here. Stop. Try it again. Maybe I was talking too long and it froze on me.
There you go.
There we go. All right, there we go. So one of the things that we wanted to capture again is just this conversation. And so to give everyone kind of where we are, there's a time schedule that we'll go through. Naturally, we've talked about time frames in which we have to get the question to the commission. We will review our question that we had from last year. We have an example question similar to what we talked about last year as well, just from an example perspective. And then we have board discussions and considerations that, you know, the board can definitely chime in as it pertains to kind of what you all want to see in this next question. With the timeline considerations, it's very important to note that here's the layout. I'll give it all to you right now. January 11th through just today, of course, January 12th, depending on where we are at the end of tonight, we will send that question over to legal. Next week on the 16th, we'll adopt whatever question the board has for tonight. January 23rd is the deadline. Election day is April the 4th. And so April the 2nd. That is, didn't know that. Thank you for sharing. So this is a very important slide without saying everything that needs to happen between now and April the 2nd, but here is exactly what we are working towards as it pertains to a timeline very similar to last year. As a matter of fact, we met last year on January 11th. I don't think you guys know that, but now you do. I think we did. And so here we are again. Actually, Michelle, did we meet last year on January 11th? I think we did. I think we met last year on January 11th. Yep. Yeah. It's just a random thought that kind of went through my brain. Sorry about that. Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. And so we have this timeline here that is, again, just like last year, we have to closely follow it for, you know, the purposes of getting the question to the commission in a timely manner. And hopefully, again, after tonight, we'll have some better language around what we're looking forward to do. This next slide here, I'm actually going to turn it over to Mr. Chady just to go over what our survey looked like last year. I could easily run it over, but I have my partner here, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Chady, and I'll take it from there.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. So as I was thinking through how we bring this before the board this evening, the one thing that really resonated with me was perhaps we ought to do a brief pause and reflection back on last year's question, specifically the operational referendum question from last year. And as I was processing it myself, a revelation occurred. Maybe some of you have already seen it, but I'll share it with you. And that's, I'm not sure if this was intentional or if this was just a happenstance, but you'll note in last year's question that it asked for $14 million for the 23-24 school year and $9 million for the 24-25 school year, which just kind of coincides with that option one, $9 million that we tested. It didn't happen intentionally because of that. It came of that unintentionally, but it was somewhat ironic to me as I was thinking about it and, you know, thinking it through that it somewhat goes to show that the projection of the need from a year ago still lands us pretty darn close to what the projection of the need is for this coming year. The one difference between, the one other thing that I thought about with regards to last year's question is that $14 million that was sought for this current year was really, I think, more of a fund balance replenishment opportunity. And the operational referendum question that the board will consider really does not address fund balance replenishment at all over the next 3 years. So if there's that lingering thought in the back of your mind that perhaps we'll be able to build our fund balance significantly to help recover some of that loss, That's not going to be the case. There's an opportunity to rebuild marginally. If we have surpluses in given years, we'll likely have a surplus in the first year if the referendum were to pass, but then we're going to draw upon that surplus in year 3 in order to make it through the 3-year period that we're suggesting. So just that type of reflection is all. I just think it's important for the board to look back just as much as we start looking forward.
Thank you, Ms. Shady. And so, again, last year we didn't pass by, and it's by the smallest of margins. 406 votes was the separation there. From a reflection perspective, I think, we learned a lot last year. I think we, as a school district, learned that there's more information that we want to get out to our families. There's more information that we need to get out to our community. And we want to make sure that happens again this time around. Again, no matter what side of the conversation you're on, it's our responsibility to make sure the information is out and for people to make, an informed decision at the polls on April the 2nd. Now, April the 2nd also falls again during spring break, and so there's going to have to be some other conversations that we will need to have to make sure that we're able to capture everybody's vote during that time. Absentee voting could be an opportunity. Early voting could be an opportunity. I know that, again, people may go on spring break, and so that's something that we would have to kind of consider along the way. I know that there's going to be efforts to, register people for voting as well. Those are just things that happens on every election cycle. And those things will continue to happen just as they should in any election. And so last year we spent a lot of time really looking at, questions and again, this is just an example question. All right. I want to make sure that's very, cleanly stated. This is just an example question. The board could, look at it, change it. The 2 main questions that we're going to pause before we, go any further is to really have a discussion around what is it that the board wants to do as pertains to the overall number, $9 million, $11 million, and the 12.8. And here's where I have to pause, because here's where the board has to, give us some direction as it pertains to what direction you want to go in for the referendum. Now, I have to, just to recap again, $9 million we had our highest support, followed by the $11 million. And then, of course, the least amount of support was in that 12.8 conversation. Again, this is just a, synopsis. Any numbers can change. But again, when you're thinking about a past referenda, right? Thinking about a past referenda, we want to make sure that that's what we're looking for in this conversation. We need a past referendum to support the needs of our school district moving out for the next 3 years is kind of what we have been pitching this as, okay? Last year we had a 2-year non-recurring referenda. That's another thing that we have to talk about. But first, again, I need the board to give us direction around the number. So I'll pause and I'll turn it over to our acting board president. Not acting, but the board president. Yeah, numbers, yeah. So open it up for questions or board considerations.
Yeah, I think that board members will weigh in on our numbers. But before, I will talk about last year, though. The strategy last year was, 1, to get the information in front of the community so they would understand our financial need. And there was a choice for our community to say yes or no. But the information had already been presented. And what we did go with was, for 2 years, we were trying to hold that mill rate at the same space to provide that funding. And we didn't go with 1 year, because in 1 year, your tax would have been one thing, and then it was immediately going to end up getting higher. So we tried to hold it for 2 years. That's the choice that was put there. And like you said, the financial projections are holding. We did receive that Baird presentation. So we know kind of with those different numbers what that does for us. And you have the survey from Mr. Demuse about what our community has supported, and people the validity of the survey as it approximates that those who take time to fill it out is like those that will actually go vote and what the survey said. And like you said, either you're turning out voters and people are, because they're more informed and are going to support it, you know, and that's why we use that tool to help us predict. So there's some things to talk about, and even before we begin, just explain to board members, there's 7 of us, and we've got to come to a place of agreement, consensus, or, you know, we vote or however, but we'll talk about numbers and let's see where these numbers end up at. And whoever wants to go next can go.
I'll jump in. I think, you know, reflecting on last year, we took the time to do the ad hoc committee and we asked opinions. We ended up not choosing an option that coincided with the feedback from that committee. And if you remember I voted against that last year, not because I wanted to vote against the referendum, but I thought voting for a referendum that I felt we could pass. And I think that's the key here. And so I think we find ourselves in a situation again where we've asked for the feedback, had a pretty good turnout on the feedback. And I think it would be a mistake again if we overreached and asked for more than even by the numbers show even has a chance of passing, you know. And again, this is just the first step. I think, you know, obviously after that we have to address the rest of the concerns. We got to educate how we're going to spend the money. You know, we got to prove all that out. But for tonight's purposes, I think my vote or leaning would be to follow the public response and stick with that. You know, whatever that number ends up being, 9 million-ish, you know, that we decide on in that option 1.
Brian Anderson with a 9. All right.
I didn't know if we were going in particular order or... All right. Brian, I appreciate your perspective. And the way I look at the information from the survey, which I'm grateful people responded, is that the community is telling us 2 things. One, the majority of the support of who took the survey, because that's not all encompassing of the demographic of our community, support the 9. But they also told us they don't want cuts. So it's 2 pieces of information. So I am leaning towards the thank you for telling me that you don't want cuts. And I think that we should ask for the amount that we need in our district. I don't see the wisdom in needing 12 and asking for 9. Because then if it passes, people have given you money and you still haven't been able to fully do the thing you need it to do. So I am for 12. Because it's clear to me that of the community members that participated in the survey, they don't want to see cuts. And I don't think that's possible without fully funding the district.
Just for a quick point of clarification there, I know that we tested 9, 11, and 12.8. If the board were to consider the amount that would not require any reductions over the course of the 3 years, that number would be around the $12 million mark.
No, thank you so much for that clarification. It's helpful.
I got Amy leave you down at 12.
Can I ask a quick question before I throw in my 2 cents? I just wanted to jot down so I have it in front of me. Can you just remind us what is the projected mill rate impact for each of the options? Sure. So like option 1, what are the dollars and cents for people, right, for each one?
I can pull it up, yeah.
Thank you.
So the projected mill rate for, and you won't see it up there as I'm on a separate screen, but the projected mill rate for the $9 million is $6.11, $6.11. The projected mill rate for the $11 million is the $6.84 number. And the projected mill rate for the $12.8 million is the $7.49 number.
So then just to clarify, all three of these options put us below the state average. Is the state average still 770?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Whoever wants to go next.
I'll go next. I've been doing a lot of talking to different employees, present and past, community members, people that don't have kids in the district, people that do. Beloit wants better schools. They want better academics. They want to see our students succeed. And I am so glad to hear that. I love the passion people have for that. And I think that comes out when you read the school perceptions, the comments that people wrote, that took the time to write comments on the surveys. I believe we can ask for the 12 million that would prevent us from having to make cuts over the next 3 years, prevent us from having to go back to another referendum over the next 3 years. And I believe we can make it pass, but only if we are very specific with how we are going to spend the money, what we're spending the money on, how it's going to improve our academics.
Is that Tia Johnson with a 12?
With that caveat, these example questions, staff retention, what does that mean to the average Beloiter? It doesn't mean a hill of beans.
Right. So I got you for counting. One of the things, I see you, Mr. Nichols. I want to get you in here. As we're working through this consensus, there's 7 of us, so we got to get 7 spaces down, and then we got to figure where we're at. And we're either going to be 9, 11, or 12 as the options were tested. The validity, again, of the tool that was given to us, we can look at it, we can choose to look at it different ways, but there's the way that the tool is designed, as Mr. Demuse explained that to us. And it's our choice to ask for less or more, but we know what we've tested. And I understand the caveats, but like I said, we got to get a number first, and then those other parts will get in. And one part that I would add before I get to Mr. Nichols is our situation is complex. It's going to take time to move through it, and this is like a first step. So if this was a movie, we would pick a number, and then people would go to the election day, it would pass, and then, hey, we won. But that's not over. Even if we get to 12, that's not the end of the movie for Beloit. And I think that people have to understand that when they choose to vote for it or against it, and for ourselves, whether we offer 9 or 12 now, or 9, 11, or 12, if we're successful in this, we still have capital projects, $23 million worth of end of life you should do now projects, and over the course of 10 years, $140 million. We are taking our time to ask one operational question right now, because you can only ask 2 questions in a year. And if we don't pass the operational question in April, well, we could ask a capital or operational question in November. Fix building for a district that we're not going to be able to operate. So we got choices. So this is multiple steps no matter what. But we still got to pick a number between 9, 11, 12, or some other number. And I think it's important for those that would support a referendum, and even those that would be against it, to understand what's really at stake. And if you're only tuning in sporadically, your opinion can be shaped by other things, but that's where we're at. So go ahead, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Sean. And again, my apologies to the board for not being there. I shared with some of you today that my wife and I have been battling a bug, and I didn't think you would want me to share it with the board. So I'm going to keep it here in the house. Before we get too far down the road, I have a couple of issues to bring up that lead here, but I think that things that we have been remiss in not addressing sooner, and that was brought to my attention by the gentleman that sent us all an email last week about the state of the DPI report card. And it took me further to an email that was sent by Mrs. Fox back on the first day of school about chronic absenteeism. So, and to kind of go along with what Tia just said, we've got a lot of things that are on this example resolution, but they're just words on paper unless we have meaningful information to provide to the public. All of us report to the public. Those of us who are elected, we were elected by the public. And I can tell you there's not a person I've talked to in this city that doesn't want a prosperous, well-run school district. They want the Beloit School District to succeed above all else. But we haven't even gone over the DPI report card that was, the first media representation of it was in October by a Madison media station. It's now December or January, so 3 months ago it was first mentioned. We've not dove into it, but this gentleman did an amazing job, from my standpoint, of diving into the DPI report card. There's a lot of data there, a lot of information. I think we need to be able to share that information to the public, and what are we going to do to improve it? It's easy to sit here and say, well, we need 9 million or 12 million or 11 million, and we're going to do these things. But as Tia said, Board Member Johnson said, we have to have substance to that. And back to the chronic absenteeism, both people mentioned this. One person, that was her report, was strictly on absenteeism, and we can't educate our kids if they're not in the seats. I mean, that's simple, but we've got to do that. And I chatted with her today, and nobody from the district ever got back to her, other than a cursory, thank you for your information. But and this kind of goes to what Brian said earlier, that he didn't vote because we were the board decided to go a different direction than what the public suggested, or the ad hoc committee. We need to listen to the community. And I think if we listen to the community, I'm not saying we have to do every single thing they say, but we listen, we study, we ask questions. And this gentleman that wrote the draft last week, he's proposing a joint get together to help to get the Beloit School District successful. And I would advocate that we do that. I mean, he even sent that to other members of the city government. So I think he's pretty strong about it. So where do we go from? What number is right? I could go either with all three of them separately, or one, or whatever. But I agree that we have to have substance, not just. We have to prove that we can do this, and this to the community. And I don't know what all the questions we're asking in the meetings, but I would hope to think that some people were asking about academic achievement, which is the ultimate goal of this school district, is teaching our kids to have full lives once they leave this district. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to pick one of them, though, for our consensus.
I would have to go with 9 million at this point.
Thank you. Gotcha. Who wants to go next? Yeah, me and Greg or Megan.
Well, I think in order to do what we really need to do to improve academic achievement, to improve attendance, and to continue to move the district forward, we really need to be at that 12.8. However, even looking at the data that we have at this point, I don't think there is a way that this community will support that level. I would like us to maybe talk about or discuss, do we have options between that 9 and 11 that can at least put us into a situation that we're not having to make drastic cuts over the next 3 years, but still to be within reach of the ability or the willingness of this community to pass it.
Mr. Schneider, is that a 10?
Between 9 and 11. Whether that's, if we're going to do it in half, it'd be like 10 and a half. But so
for consensus building, that would okay. I got you. Who's going next?
Okay, I'll jump in. So I'm going to come in and answer your question with a question. So I want to just, first of all, I just really appreciate what everybody has shared, and I fully support elements of people who have shared both 9 and 12. So let me see if I can weave something together and then ask a question. I agree, Brian, that we need to stay in line with what the community believes is possible, because ultimately that is the nature of the partnership we have in this particular funding option, right? I also, one thing that hasn't been mentioned, that sort of, Sean, I appreciate you touching on, we are going to have to at some point go to a capital referendum, I assume, to pay for, what did you say it was over 10 years, $140 million worth of stuff, right? I mean, that's not something we're going to be able to stash money in the piggy bank for over 10 years.
Not when you're spending out of the fund balance because you don't have enough operating.
Correct.
Right.
And the other piece that I want to bring up that hasn't been brought up yet is the fact that year after year, just like every other school district in Wisconsin, fund balance is how we make up the shortage of what DPI and the state do not fund for special education, which is the money that we have to spend and we should be spending on our most vulnerable learners. So over the last couple of years, it's been around somewhere between $8 and $10 million out of fund balance, just right there. Okay, so these are some things that I'm thinking about. So while I agree with your rationale for 9, I also fully support what Amy and Tia have shared about we need to fully fund what we need to do. And we also need to clearly articulate, here is in our strategic plan how these things will occur, or here's some implementation steps we have added, or whatever that process is that our administration, I'm sure, will fill us in on. So having said that, here's my question. If we were to go with a recurring rather than a non-recurring referendum around that 9 number, which puts us, or even around, kind of like what Greg was saying, kind of on the lower end though, right? Between 9 and 10, that puts the fund balance at $6 and something. Does that, A, be responsive to the community? B, does that allow us to be more sustainable and make fewer drastic cuts? And C, does that also give us the wiggle room to give us a reasonable mill rate when we need to go back and ask for a capital referendum? And I don't know the answers to those questions. So I wanted to ask those first before I weigh in.
So I'll first address the recurring component. Recurring referendums sound great because once approved, the money's there forever. It's kind of built into the base within the revenue limit. But at the same token, 2 caveats to that. One, a $9 million recurring today does not necessarily equal $9 million worth of buying power 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years down the road. So while recurring has some sort of permanence to it, it also has, at some point in time, an insufficiency that'll occur. That your $9 million won't be enough anymore. The other thing that I would say, most times districts that utilize the recurring referendum opportunity have done a non-recurring opportunity and had that passed by voters once or twice for a cycle. You know, a 2-year cycle, 3-year cycle, 5-year cycle, and then they repeat it with another non-recurring. And then after like 8 years or 6 years or something, they're like, the taxpayers have been contributing to that. Let's just ask them for that amount on a recurring basis. And then to be honest with you, they ask for a little bit more on a non-recurring basis to kind of refresh and to really close the gap and meet the need. I'm not sure that Beloit's ready for that. I'm not a resident of Beloit, and I don't report back to the taxpayers and the electors like you do. But I think a non-recurring is probably a better direction for the school district to consider at first.
Thank you so much for answering that.
And actually, I also want to just, chime in on that thought. We also, that wasn't shared with our community as well in the survey. And so part of this work is, is trust building. Okay. I mean, I'm, being here last year, really trying to gain the trust of our community. We came up real short from our last past referenda. We shared what we were going after. And like I said, we came up short. But again, by the narrowest of margins. Part of this work is, again, just trust building. I believe that over time, what we've been able to do is to say, hey, we had a request last year. We got the same request this year. Our needs are still in place. And just so that, this is also, noted in the room, we have had some success from 1 year, and I think sometimes that gets missed. We did a huge undertaking last year with reconfiguring our school district. And a lot of our families are extremely happy with that thought. Okay. And that shouldn't go, unnoticed with the time that we had in order to make those changes. We also balanced our budget, which is a huge undertaking that we need to make sure people are aware of. Whether it's $10 million, $4 million to a balanced budget, that's a huge undertaking that we had to start taking a look at. That's a trust thing, right? We also, on the state report card, against popular belief, we also went up on our report card. We didn't go down. And I know that's not where everybody wants to, land at times. No one's happy with the 53.4. We want to be 58 or higher. That's the meets. But we didn't go in the opposite direction as well. Okay? Which, again, is a very important concept in the trust part of this work, especially the work that I have to, continue to move forward with wonderful employees that come to work every day to do the work that we are asking everyone to accomplish. On top of that, we also increased our enrollment. Against popular belief, again, that enrollment didn't just drop off. We did some things in the summertime to get the enrollment back. And so I need people to also understand that this is a trust part. So what we did last year is something that we have to notice. We have to note that we want better results. Yes, we want better results. But again, this is year one. We're going into year two. We're going to keep trying to make those, we're going to keep making those changes that we need to make to continue to gain the trust of our community. Now, again, those things should not be left off the conversation. We had a request last year, and now we have a second request. Our survey, again, is telling us, based off of the survey results, that the support is at 51.3% with the $9 million. That's what the survey is stating right now. I understand the sentiments and the comments that the board is sharing, but I would be remiss to say that, again, based off of what the survey is saying, $9 million is what people are saying they will support. And we need a past referenda. We need a past referenda. whether it be 9, 11, or 12.8, we need a pass referendum. And that's where I really want people to also, consider in this conversation. We do need a pass referendum to keep us moving forward in this conversation. And it is true, Mr. Chater just mentioned it, and I also mentioned the same thing, that yes, this is a non-reoccurring referenda, but after that third year, changes we're making, we probably going to come right back to the table with another request. Again, we have capital that we have to look at, and we probably will have operational again 3 years from now. CPI has never kept up with what they're getting from the state, what we're getting from the state. Over 70% of our districts have went to operational referenda. Beloit is not exempt from that conversation. The school district of Beloit is not exempt from not having to ask for support, no matter where we want to grow from. This is where we are right now, and we do have this need. Now, as the district administrator, we stated this last year. We're stating it again. The survey we put out to gather the information that we need to gather, and here we are with the request being, well, based off of what was support, again, with the 2.39, Mr. Muse shared it last week, with the margin of error, we're right back in that same conversation around 48%, 52%, right around that middle ground again. Now, we do know that in our survey, we missed a lot of the parents. We missed a lot of the parents in that survey, okay? And it's noted, it's in the survey, all right? I do believe there's work to be done to make sure that our parents are involved in this conversation this time around. But what's very, very true is without the support of a $9 million, 11 or 12, there will be different changes that could also hurt our student achievement and move us in a different direction, because there could be more cuts, there could be more changes to our school district. We did have to close schools last year. No one is trying to go down that road again. That is not the will of the school board, I know, but it's also not the will of this district administration as well to keep trying to close schools. No district is saying wants to just keep closing schools. And in this case, our enrollment went up. So I get a little bit, thoughtful in this approach, because we have to strategically make sure people also hear the other side of that conversation. We have done some things that do need to be noted. We did go up on our report card. We did close 2 schools. We did reshift the district from a K-3 to a K-5 school district. We kept the neighborhood schools in place. We balanced our budget. These are all the things that did happen in 9 months. So it's time for us to start realizing that and speaking up about it very clearly. Because what's at jeopardy again is our students. This does matter. And we need to, that commentary also needs to be, put out there. Again, no one is saying that what people are sending us is not being taken into consideration. But right now, we have a need, and we need to address the need, which is a referendum being passed. And I believe, again, the public has spoken based off of the survey with the support around $9 million.
All right. Thank you so much for filling that in for me. So given so thank you so much. I think where I land then, Board President Levy, is because I too believe in building trust, and I have to echo what Board Member Levy said, that while people said 9, that also wasn't reflected in what people were willing to go without. And so in the spirit of building trust with people to say, we're asking you to help fund these goals, and we want to be able to continue to show that progress and improvement. And we want to continue to do so in a way that doesn't disappoint people when they say, well, hang on a second, we passed a referendum, why are we cutting? Because people might not have made that connection. I mean, I have to go with the 12 because I'm hearing from our administration that that's the number that we need to continue to build on that progress, and to do so without making the cuts that the survey clearly says people are not interested in making. So that's where I land.
Just for clarification, when we are saying 12, does that translate to the 12.8 that's in the language of the question?
For instance, I'm keeping the tally here and trying to figure out where people are at. Yeah, when I say 12, it's the 12 it's the 12 that we asked about, okay. And then it will come back around.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going with the 9 because of my understanding of the tool. And I think that the reality is we could ask for 12, and no matter what, you got to get the votes to come. But I think the way that I'm looking at this is it's a multi-step process, and the first step is to pass the referendum. Yeah, 12 would be better. 11 would be better than 9, but you got to pass the referendum first. And if it fails, we'll be making the same decisions come around November. We'll have that conversation if it fails. So I think that the other parts of, go back, I would think about like just the consistency of the approach that we have taken as a board. We've demonstrated, as Dr. Garrison said, changes from last year, April 2023 to April 2024. You're a 1-star district, then you're a 2-star district, so your academics are improving. It's not what you want it to be, but that's improvement. It didn't go down this year. It's like I said before, we are trending up. The negative narrative, that doesn't help. But the reality is people's children are just going to keep coming through the district as they come until people choose different options. And so I know students could have better experiences with 12 versus 9. We're hoping for different outcomes with 9, 11, or 12. And if we get nothing, we're still hoping for better outcomes. But all of that those things are all going to happen, but they're not all happening together. Because whether we pass a referendum or not, kids are going to be in school. But it's the conditions that the children have to be in school under and the adults that are serving them. For us as a community, it might be that after we pass 9 and we're continuing to communicate about what our needs are, that we'll pass the next one that we need to pass. I just keep saying this for people to understand it's a multi-step process. It's not a movie and a yes vote just wins it. There's things that are going to have to be done to continue to address the size of our district. We're still in that process. And the reality is some of the things that our administration may recommend to us, some of the things that we might ask to see, they're not that that's what people want to do, but it's the reality of working with the numbers that we have. If everyone believes that teachers should be paid the CPI, then you got to do something with this referendum so the teachers can be paid that. You can't give an 8% raise and blow all the money that the state gave you to create a deficit budget, which we didn't do. But then you've got the other parts of your district. You've got parts you got parts of your district fighting each other and against itself. That was a difficult decision to make because yes, our educators, all of our educators, all of the employees in the district deserve to get the highest. But that would have put us at a deficit budget. And we decided that we were going to ask for money in a referendum first, and then we dealt with that. So just highlighting on what Board Member Levy said, that no one's saying what to cut, or we don't want these cuts, but we're not going to support a referendum. The time of talking from both sides, that doesn't work. And I've said this before. As a board, we have made positive steps to make sure that the 7 of us are working together to do the things that need to be done for the district. And we're not the reason the district is not working. We're not shooting ourselves in the foot by the work that we're performing together. So when we come to this point that there needs to be a positive momentum for the whole community to support the things that we need. Many of the things that we're talking about we were in some spaces where the things that we were doing were not the right things to do. They were not helping us. And we might have lots of different disagreements, but it's easy to say we were doing this and now we got to start doing that. And that's really where we're at. We're still not at the place where, I think we ought to go left and you think we ought to go right, and we're fighting about it. We're still in this process, like I said before. The first 7 steps of where we need to go, we're all in agreement because it's clear that we got to do something different. When we get to step number 8 is when we start saying, I think we ought to go left and you think we ought to go right. We're still in the first set of the things that we got to do. When we came to referendum last year, we knew we needed the money. The company we were working with for the facility study, we didn't have what we needed. And now we have the completed facility study, so we understand what our needs are. The operational referendum, the math was math, and then we figured out what we needed to ask for. That's, as Mr. Chady said, and we asked for it. So we have tools and there's processes and things that need to happen. Those things have happened, and now we're trying to execute on that work. So that's really the set of choices that we have, and that's why I'm going with the 9, because I'd like to first to form a consensus, and then after we have that consensus, I'd like all 7 of us to support it. But I'm at 9, so Greg Schneider with 10.5, 11. But Mr. Chady's got a question first.
Not really a question. I just want to reflect back for the board and the public as a whole. In absence of a referendum, we have an approximate $10.9 million deficit next year. That represents about 11% of our budget. And I appreciate Mr. Nichols' comments earlier, and he and many members of the public are right about needing to do better with student achievement. But it's hard to do that if we're reducing the district's budget by 11%, $10.9 million. I mean, a reduction is hard, increasing is hard, but when you're trying to do both, going in opposite directions, that's really tough. So without a referendum, $10.9 million deficit, I think it's really important for the community to recognize and reflect on this also. If the ask amount was $9 million, our deficit next year is 1.8, almost 1.9 million. It's $9 million less, obviously, but there's still a deficit in each of the next 3 years. So we still have reductions that we need to make, or we need to strategically reprioritize our resources to where those monies make a greater impact and difference. But we still need to, reduce expenses. So the district has to give, and hopefully then the taxpayers kind of have to give or offer their support to. If the referendum passes, that too is the public sign of trust, right? I mean, that's their way of saying, we trust that you're going to do right by these resources and deliver what we're looking for. Thank you.
I have a question. And Dr. Garrison, I think this is for you. Since you are the main message carrier for the referendum, you and your team, is your team prepared to, for lack of a better word, forgive me, sell a referendum when even if it passes, we're also going to have cuts? Like, is that a message that is being shared so people are cognizant of that? If a $9 million referendum passes, that's great, and we'll also have cuts. Is that a part of the narrative?
Great question, and I think the survey said it as well, that there would be additional possible cuts that we will have to make with the $9 million. And so I've been able to not only put it out through the survey, and I've also shared that information as well, that there will be cuts that we'll still have to make with the $9 million request. So when you say sell it, my goal is to get a pass referenda, and I'm gonna go out and do everything I possibly can to pass the referendum, whether again it's 9, 11, or 12.8. And so, just like last year, we had a 478 conversation with 2 operational conversations, and we changed what the thought was, and I went out and did the best we could. Well, I will say the school district, and that we did the best we could to sell what this would mean for us and what it also would mean for us if we didn't pass it, which again, we had to make strategic cuts across the board, which was very hard. I think the public also, again, that's the trust part. We did make, certain concessions last year to get to where we are with the balanced budget this year. I made it very clear that, we could easily be one high school, one middle school, 4 elementary schools. No one wants to talk about that. No one wants to even have that conversation. But I made it very clear that these were the things that we would have to start to consider in absence of having any support, from the community. And it's not what anyone wants to do. And so sell it. I will support what the board wants me to, move forward with. I am the main messenger. Everyone knows that. But I think our parents are also going to play a heavy role in that, being the main messenger. I also think community members can also play a part about being a huge messenger in this to get us to where we really want to be. Last year, I did feel as if we did, the best job that we possibly could to get the information out. This year I'm going to go at it just as hard as we possibly can, because that's a need that we have. And I've stood here and I've stated the same thing since I walked into the door last year. We got a lead last year. We have another need this year. And so we are prepared to sell the $9 million with knowing that there's going to be cuts. But again, it gives us something for it, or whatever we end up landing on, tonight.
And first of all, thanks for that perspective. Sell was definitely the wrong word. To present the information to the community. So everyone, please forgive me. If I was just a layperson in the community and I supported the referendum, it would not even be on my mind that on April 2nd, if the referendum passes, that's great, and here comes cuts. And I know at this point this is moot, but is there a reason that fully funding the district at the 12.8 was not the floor for what we asked people about?
So we look at, a lot of different things that we had to consider in that thought. Tax tolerance here in the school district of Beloit was something that we had to consider. We did not pass the last referendum was another huge thing that we had to consider in this thought. So the 478 conversation, tax tolerance was the conversation. So we had to try to use, I hate to say a floor, but we had to use the number of $9 million to get us through, knowing that we will possibly still have to make changes. The $11 million gave us the opportunity to kind of move us forward. And again, the 12.8 was the opportunity to grow even more. But again, that tax tolerance conversation is something that, myself, my business department, other financial opportunities had to discuss, because again, going from, I believe we were at 7 before we went to 478, we were at 7 something, and then we went to 478, and now we're down to 396. And so now we have to think about that jump back to the possibilities of $6 all the way up to 749. And so we did consider all that, and that's kind of why the $9 million, $11 million, and the 12.8 was put in place.
Please forgive me. I think I may not have been clear, because for a mill rate, 611, 684, and 749 is not that huge of a jump. So
from 3.
Hold on, let me finish thought.
Sure.
And I get but if you're going from 3 to 611, 3 to 684, or 3 to 749, if you're already going to be at 6 from 3, that's the jump. For me, not the increments after that.
Okay.
So my question is, what was the reason that fully funding the district wasn't the floor of the ask?
Well, Board Member Levine, before that, I understand your question about the floor of the ask, but my thought, the first part, and you didn't ask me, but are you saying that if 12 million was the first option that people surveyed could answer, would they have supported that? Like if it was 12 14 and 16, where would our community be? Because 12 is the lowest number?
Yes, and I think it would have gave us a better set of information to work with. For me, it is really difficult for one of the options to be, and I'll say a referendum passing is success. To have success and still have cuts is an awkward place to be in. And if I was a community member, that would be very off-putting to me. Like, no, I gave you money to support this. Why are you still having to do cuts? So for me, it would make sense that to fully fund the district and not have to make those cuts over the 3 years, for me, that would have made sense that that was the floor of our ask. Because then if we had a successful referendum, it wouldn't include cuts.
Right.
I can address that for you real quick. Using your terminology, the floor of the ask. As we were working with school perceptions to build the survey, we were awaiting the budget model to be refreshed from Baird. So we used some rough numbers, which turned out to be pretty good and accurate. Calculated outside of the budget model for the school perception survey to get that process going, because it had to go to print, had to be mailed, in a timely fashion. After that had been provided to them, the budget model was received and was more fully available for us to actually run scenarios with. So, and that's, we ran the scenarios based on what the ask amounts were in the referendum survey. And even the 12.8, while we ran the scenario, it's actually a little bit higher than what the need would be if we were to get through the 3 years with no reductions at all. So just kind of a timing thing.
No, that's really helpful. So are you saying if process B came before process A, then the 12.8 may have been option one?
I don't think.
I was just asking them.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps. If the budget model were available in advance, we would have had the opportunity to run scenarios to further refine the ask amounts. Yeah.
So would the lowest ask amount, let's say you had all of the budgeting information you ever could imagine you needed before the survey went out, would you imagine the lowest option being something other than what was needed to fully fund the district?
We strategically considered what the state average of mill rates were, and we strived to be reasonably below the state average of mill rates. So that was taken into consideration. So let's just say the mill rate for next year is $7.70. We likely would not have brought forward recommendations for values that would have, put our mill rate above $8.
So the focus was the mill rate, if I'm understanding you correctly, and not fully funding the district.
The focus was, what can we present to the voters that has the greatest likelihood of passage?
But not fully, because and I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just trying to understand the prioritization. So the priority in the ask, and I get if B came before A, all of that noted, was not to fully fund the district, but what you believe the community could tolerate.
When we're thinking about fully funding the district too, it's also a little bit hard because there's state numbers that we have to look at. The fully funded piece is so difficult because, again, like I mentioned, the state has never fully funded what we need in the first place to run our school district.
No, I get it. That's why we're going to referendum. But if I understood you correctly earlier, the 12.8 would fully fund the district for 3 years.
Even a bit less than that would fully fund the district for 3 years, correct. Now, I'll also say, if I can, I've been involved in operational referendums, I think, in 3 different districts, and I don't remember if it's 5, 6, or 7 times. Only 2 have failed. One was last April in this district, and one was the first referendum that the school district of Fort Atkinson did. I've never seen a referendum pass where you ask for an amount without having to make reductions. Never. The community wants you to do your part too. They just don't want to give you more money. They need the school district to do their part and prioritize and reduce expenses where we can.
No, that's really good. So to go back to my original question, so hopefully I can get an answer on that. When the questions were constructed, it was tax tolerance as the priority, not fully funding the district. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate, along with the opportunity to pass, yes.
Okay.
Referendums are hard. I mean, I hate to tell you this, but I usually take a vacation in spring, and I'm not. I mean, that's out of the question, because this referendum is too important to the school district of Beloit, the students, the staff in this community. We can't afford to be gone if there's questions that come up.
I totally agree, and I appreciate that sacrifice. Thank you for answering my question.
Pass to Board Member Johnson, but again, one of the things that we said before is that there are timeline obligations for many of the decisions that we've made. We don't have all the pieces at once to help us make the best decision with everything laying out in front of us. We're waiting on things from people. We're waiting on a facility study. We're waiting on the state to tell us what the biannual budget's going to be. And so we're trying to control by doing. That's why we asked last year, because we knew we had a need. We didn't know what the biannual budget was going to be in July when it was last November. And when we look at our survey, the survey says your community will pass the $9 million option, plus or minus. If 12 was the floor, the survey we gave now says they're not going to pass one at 12. So that's kind of the space.
Well, really, I don't think we can project that. We don't have to spend some time on this. If people are saying, yes, I want to support, but I want to go with the lowest option, we don't know if that could have been the mode of thinking. Or I don't think community members opened the survey and was like, I'm supporting it $9 million. That's it. So I think it's more nuanced than that.
I'm going to move us down to Board Member Johnson, but again, that's the reason that the first thing that we're doing is trying to get a consensus. We're at 3-3. We need a fourth, and then we got to move forward because there's other things to do. But we got to get to that place first that you got to develop a consensus. And all those other questions all the questions we're asking are the same, whether it's 9, 11, or 12. But we got to get to a place, and we're not there yet. Board Member Johnson.
Thank you, President Levy, and thank you, Board Member Levy. That is an important question. You know, what is the bottom? I'll never forget one year in high school, one of my math teachers was telling us students that he wanted a file cabinet for his classroom. So he went to administration and said he needed 3 file cabinets so that he would get one. So sometimes that's the way it is. So looking at this right now, we've got 3 9s, 3 12.8s, and 1 10.5. That brings us to an average of 10.8.
Right, I got you, but I want to ask Board.
But wait, go ahead. May I please finish? Again, I'm okay with 9. I'm okay with 15. As long as we can justify and be held accountable for what we're spending our money on. Right now, I've got 5 bullet points that pertain to academics, and then the 5th bullet point would be the fund balance. And those, it's when I get work done on my house, I don't go to the bank and say, how much money can I have? I go to a contractor and say, this is what I would like. What is it going to cost me? Then I go to the bank and say, can I have this money? I think we need to look at how much money we have. We cannot cut teachers. I have had people crying in front of me. The burden our teachers, the stress burden our teachers have is phenomenal. They need and deserve to be compensated for that. And we have to promise not to cut teaching staff.
Okay, so this is Well, I'll move this to the consensus first. Hey, Greg Schneider, since you're at a number that's off the track there, I'm going to ask you to do something, because then we're going to be shorter, because we have to, our goal tonight, we have to achieve a consensus, and then we can talk about those other points. But you got to have a number so that we can we can move forward.
No pressure.
I know. Well, I think the 12.8 million is really what the district needs if we are going to continue to move forward without having to make drastic cuts. And the $11 million option still would mean we would have to cut $2,306,024 over the next 3 years. The $9 million option says we have to cut just under $8 million over the next 3 years. I'm not sure that the community would support a $12.8 million referendum. You know, as we look at a $9 million referendum, the district needs to cut almost dollar for dollar what this community is going to give us. And if we still are looking at, we have to move students forward in academic achievement, we have to increase attendance, we need to continue to keep the enrollment stable or increase. I'm not sure we can do that at the $9 million level. But if my options are only the 12.8 or the 9 million, I would have to go with the 9 million. But I don't think that's going to meet the needs. Or public really needs to know, if you're going to give us 9, then we have to cut 8. And their survey said they don't want us to cut anything. I mean, so if we're looking at the two options that are there, I don't think the 12.8 will pass. I would have to go with the 9. I would still much prefer to stay on that average of, you know, the 10, 10 and a half, or 10, something a little, giving us a little bit more. But
okay. Anybody in 12 want to move over? Okay. So as our consensus right now, we're at 9. Get another hand up. All right, 60 seconds, everybody. You say what you want to say. Let's work our way down.
Oh, I just have go ahead, Greg.
I don't have anything else to say.
I'm not able to support 9.
So let me ask you a question. I know. So does that mean, so like, because I think we should be asking for 12, there could, just as a hypothetical, there could be a 6-1 vote that we're gonna we're already going to referendum. We already said that. So it'd be 6-1, just hypothetically. We don't know what the vote.
We don't know what the vote would be. Let me pretend I'm psychic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not able to support the 9 on principle because I think we really need the 12. However, not that it's anyone's business. When I'm in the voting booth, right, I'm going to vote to support the referendum, but I don't think 9 is the right thing to do. So I'm not going to vote for anything that I don't think is the right thing to do. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, because it could just be misinterpreted. But I mean, like, because altogether, as we say, because like the messaging from the board about what we're doing, that's a part of this also.
No, I totally get that. And I think I'm pretty good about sharing with brevity the position on my votes. I'm not supporting the 9 because I think we need to ask for 12 or 12 plus, because that's what our kids need.
Right.
Period.
And you think that will pass?
I'm just not going to ask for less than what we need for our kids. And I'm not psychic, actually. I don't know if it will pass. But I think that there are a lot of people who are committed to our kids who will get out and educate and knock doors and all of those things that push us over the finish line. I'm never going to vote for something that I don't think is the right thing to do. So I can't support 9. And if that's confusing for anyone, my phone number is very public. My email is very public. Feel free to reach out.
So I'm curious to know how, we have a couple of community members who've shown up tonight. Does anybody want to weigh in? Because I honestly, I mean,
I've consulted with our attorney, and we can't take that right now.
Oh, we can't?
No.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. I guess the reason that I was curious is because, I mean, we have the information that we have from the survey, and I want to elevate something that you said, Board President Levy, about like the way the tool is designed. And I fully, like, I'm glad that you brought that up because, like, school perceptions, this is their jam, right? This is what they do. And I totally have faith in the tool and how it's designed. But the tool is designed to make a prediction. It's not designed to give us, like, yep, this is what's going to happen. There are a number of other factors in play. And like I've already expressed, Brian, I totally agree with you. Like, we need to reflect what the community wants. My confusion in being able to just like, yep, go to 9 is that the community told us 2 things. They said, we want 9 and please don't cut. And that's where I'm struggling. So that's where I'm kind of like, I kind of want some different information. So I'm inclined to, I also hear what Greg is saying. So I'm curious, with the understanding that of course we'll have to like meet people, right? I love the perspective that was shared is like, yeah, we got to continue to make cuts. We don't know what enrollment's going to do. I mean, I'm kind of curious if anybody's open to option 2.
What's option 2?
The option 2 is the 11. Yeah. And I mean, I can in spirit, Board Member Levy, like I'm with you. I think we need to ask for what our kids need. If we have, in order to get our kids what they kind of almost what they need, if we have to go with just a little less and make some cuts, okay. I still am really deeply struggling with 9 because it feels like 9 is not going to help us build the trust with the community that we're going to need to, given the things that we know. So I think the lowest I could go would be option 2. But if for official tallying purposes for consensus, I'm at 12.8 unless I hear people are thinking about option 2. I'm not sure that I could support 9 because I don't think that that's going to get us to that trust building piece Dr. Garrison spoke beautifully about. Like, it's important for us to build trust. What are we building trust on? Like a short term, like we asked you a question, you told us confusing information about, and we did the thing, we did the number part of it, but then 3 years down the road and it's time to ask for money again. And people are like, what? My kid has, 35 kids in their English class. Like, what did I pass a referendum for? I think that hurts us in the long run.
Right, that's because you only gave us 9 and not 12.
Amen. And so that's where, and exactly why I can't support 9.
All right. We'll jump down to Tia Johnson.
Thank you, President Levy. Reading the feedback from the school perceptions that Dr. Garrison got to us today, it's surprising at how accurately this has reflected the conversations I've been having out in the community and with the educators. Things really jump out. Perception of mismanagement of resources and a lack of accountability, prioritizing fair pay for teachers and staff, reevaluation of administrative positions, set higher academic standards. I don't think the 9 million will get us there. I'm one of the things that one of the teachers really emphasized to me is not just that we're losing teachers this year, but we have a lot of teachers right now considering whether or not they're going to come back next year. And they would like to know that they're going to come back to a stable situation and feel supported and be supported. And I think that we can do that. 9 million, if we're going to have to make $8 million worth of cuts, how do I even go out to the public and explain? I'm asking you for my 9 million, but we're going to have to cut 8 million. That's just, I don't.
So let me,
Priorities.
sure. I think I heard that number Mr. Snyder just mentioned, and I just want to make sure I bring clarity to that. And so, with the $9 million, yes, there will be cuts that we will still have to make. And again, that's on the survey. It was not trying to mislead anyone. There's going to be cuts that we will still have to make. Again, as Mr. Chady and I have been talking, that's part of that's part of many referendums, though, that there's a balance between what they will support, what the community will support, and of course, what we still have to do on our side to keep gaining the trust over time. In absence of our district having the tolerance conversation of referendums, period, as you know, we've only went to 4 referendums in the history pretty much of Beloit. We've passed 2. And we've failed on the other 2. So, and those were capital, mind you, as well. And so here we are, again, making sure that, again, the thought really is about, I hope the thought is, we are building a trust relationship over time, and naturally, we keep showing the results that we want to keep getting the results that we've set out to attain. Mrs. Johnson, you're correct. We're not in the business to keep losing teachers. Mr. Nichols, you're correct as well. We want to make sure that our public understands everything about, the state of our report card as well. Ms. Levy, you're right. I'm just going over online. Ms. Levy, you're right. 12 point. I'm not being facetious or anything, but you're right. 12.8 would get us there over time, and that's what our kids would need. Greg, you're right. $10 million could be a middle ground number. Mrs. Miller, you're correct. We want to fully fund everything for all of our students alongside of Mrs. Levy's statement. Sean, you're right. Listening to our conversations with our community. Mr. Anderson, you're right. Listening to our conversation with our community, supporting the $9 million. Mr. Nichols, you're right from the statements around, want to get our report card out. But we're also right from saying that $9 million is something that you would support. And so all of you have points that are well taken in this conversation. I want everyone to know that. I think the goal of this work, though, is to continuously get better. We will come with another request down the road. We will, and I'm so, I'm thankful that we're having this, wonderful discussion as well, because it shows the commitment that our board does have, whether we are going to support the 9 or the 12. It does show that. And I hope the community sees that we're not just up here with a facetious thought of we want to just support something or not support something and move on. I think we were supporting everything that we do here in the school district, and that does include our administrators, that does include our teachers, that does include our kids, that does include our parents. It does include our community, because this community deserves it. And so, again, all of you are right in your thought process. I honestly believe that. But here we are, again, with the thought around, what's going to get us to a pass referendum, right? And again, I want everyone to know that regardless of what we end up deciding, I'm going to go out and push the number as if that's going to be the number that's going to stop us from doing anything on this paper, or as it pertains to not having to cut staff and not having to, reduce all course offerings or increase our class sizes. That's my responsibility. I have to go out and still say that we're going to do everything we can to not have to impact our staff, knowing that we will have to have some conversations around what we cut. And again, there's operational cuts, there's contract cuts that we have to look at. There's many different things that, we have to take a look. We got retirements that'll come up. And every year, of course, our goal is to save some money. And so I just want to make sure that's a thought too. Again, no one is wrong in your thought process. We just have to make this, this decision so that we can, of course, continue to move forward. I think right now it sounds as if and again, the board can just say that's not where we are. Right now, it does sound as if, we are trying to still figure that out. But, this is what we did last year. We were trying to figure it out. And so this is a conversation that, I was expecting.
Just a quick point of clarification with regards to the budgetary reductions, if I can, because I think I've heard a couple of numbers that perhaps I just didn't hear them right. So let me start with the base budget model. Again, this is an absence of a referendum, or if the referendum amount, whatever the amount, were to fail, we would have a budgetary reduction next year of approximately $10.8 million. And it gets worse in the 25-26 and the 26-27 school years, of course. If the board were to adopt a $9 million question, we would have a $1.8 million deficit in the 24-25 school year, a bit more in 25-26 and 26-27 as well.
Mr. Shady, would you repeat that second number, please?
Sure. So if the board were to adopt a $9 million non-recurring referendum, the deficit amount that's currently projected, lots of assumptions and estimates, but the number that we're working with would be $1.8 million deficit.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And since we're talking about other numbers, I'll just scroll down the page and look at my $11 million scenario. If the board were to adopt an $11 million scenario or referendum, it would be projected that we would have a $120,000 surplus in the 24-25 school year, followed by 2 years of deficits. I mean, more significant, $662,000 deficit in the 25-26 school year, and about a $1.4 million deficit in 26-27.
I think it's important to note, though, again, these are projections, as we've talked about, and again, it's hard because we are still working through a budget as we go through every year. You know, that's the hard part about, you know, doing this work. And again, me and Mr. Shady have said it multiple times, this is hard. It is hard trying to project what people will do and project what our budget will be, but that's part of the work that we have to, you know, that's the work that we have to do.
So, Dr. Garrison, we are at this consensus here. It's kind of, it's 4-3, 4 for 9, 3 for 12. What do you suggest we do?
So, consensus is for right now the 9, and you know, I have to look at what the community has also put out there, knowing the projections, knowing what the school perceptions, and understanding this conversation from a superintendent to superintendent's thought. You do want to kind of err on the side of what the survey stated, and I know we're missing a lot of survey results, but in absence of that information, this is the information I currently have, and I like to go off the data, and so I have to move towards supporting, you know, $20 million, but no, not $9 million is what I have to move towards supporting, because that's what we have in our for data right now as it stands. I do know that there's going to be, you know, conversations around, you know, what that actually looks like for us down in the future. And again, that's just where, you know, this is where I'm at right now. If the question is, you know, in my lap currently, I would say, you know, 9 million to that $10 million number, but 9 million is what we have on the paper.
So with that, one of my thoughts is we need to, we're in practice. This is our second question. Well, it's our third question, actually. And every time we go around, we're gaining experiences. Let's gain an experience of passing a referendum. And then you get to the next one. We've also, like I said, April 2023 looks different than April 2024, and the things that have happened in 1 year. And these things take time. So if it's 9 million if it's the 9 this time, We got all the other things that need to happen. You got to take one step at a time. When I was coaching youth basketball, there's no 40-point shot to just get you out of the hole you're in. I do understand what you're saying about you could be shooting lower than where you'd like to be, but you don't know where. You got to put your effort into something. And we got to come to there's 7 of us, and it's 4-3. If we want to spend 2 more hours at it, I don't think you're moving. You're all where we're at. So I think that is Dr. Garrison has said we should move forward. Do you need a motion, or do you want to recommend, or we're going to come back and do this on the 16th? Just a minute. I see you. Go ahead, Tia.
Thank you, President Levy. Is a comment and a question. If we go with 9 million, I'm concerned we are setting ourselves up for future failure if we have to come back for another referendum and having voter fatigue with the Beloit board with our hands out, asking for money, not just failure in our failing referenda, but failing our students. I'm really concerned about that. If I have not made that adamantly clear, my question is there a reason we have to have one of these 3 numbers? We can't just take the average of what the board wants? The average with member Schneider's changing from 10.5 down to 9, that brings it down to 10.6.
The one thing is, okay, so we're just talking through. That's what this is about. There's 7 people we're talking through. Again, we can ask for any number that we want. The survey that we administered, and there's a reason we chose that survey, because it's a reliability about predictability about what the voters will do. So we barely have 9. And so we can ask for whatever number, but the numbers we're talking about that are past 9 are numbers that it says it's going to fail. We control what number we put out there. Voter fatigue can happen, but as a testament, no matter how bad people might think our board is, people do vote for different people, and they keep voting every election. So somebody's going to vote for something. So the next part is this. The voters, somebody's going to fatigue, or the no's or yeses. The financial conditions that we're in are not going to change unless we put something there and people vote, because what's going to happen, today is January 11th. We're going to set a number, and then in April, we're not going to have a new state report card in April. And people got to make a decision, are they going to vote yes or no? And let's say this referendum doesn't pass. In November, we can have new board members, and we're going to have the same problem. And in November, we won't have a new state report card come election day, and people still got to decide if they're going to support or not. So those things don't change. To jump up with today, we're going to get a CPI number, and April's going to come, and let's say this referendum doesn't pass, we're going to have to set teacher salary by October, like we did for our budget. And it might still be a number that we can't reach without having a deficit budget. And then we can't give the teachers the highest that they would like. And then we still got to try to pass a referendum in November. So, these things don't change. We're going to have to, there's cuts that need to be made, and we have made adjustments. And there's money that we need additional revenue and cuts. There's a process that we're going to have to go through. We're not going to get out of the processes that we have to go through. I mean,
I'm not insinuating that we're trying to get out of any process. I'm just saying, let's try to come to some consensus. There are some of us on the board that are very adamant against 9, some that are adamant against 12.8.
Right. So what I would say to that,
I have no problem with 10.6 or 10.8.
I got you.
Either average.
So this is what I'll do for that one, is we just kick that around one more time. So to the 9 people, Brian Anderson, Brian Nichols, Sean Levy, Greg Schneider, you just landed at 9, so I'll leave you for last. And this is just discussion. Brian Anderson, Brian Nichols, Sean Levy, are you interested in going to that other number that's less than 12 that those 3 people wanted 12 for?
Well, I'm not going to make it as easy as just saying yes. But, we talked a lot about, we do as a board, about staying in our roles, right? And so we asked the superintendent to do his daily duties, and we talk about our roles with him. And, and this is the community's chance to play their role, right? This is when they get to go to the polls and they get to make some decisions. And we got a survey with 1,700 results. Probably, I don't know the makeup of everybody that voted on the last referendum, but my guess is that's a similar makeup of people that took the time to do the survey that probably came out to the polls. It's the same civic duty that caused somebody to return a school survey is going to get them to the polls. So I think you can put some faith in, to the extent that you can, in the results of the survey. So that's why I think it's important to try to adhere to it. About the same turnout percentage of the people that we sent it to, 12%. I think our voter turnout last year during the election was maybe 10, somewhere around 10 to 12%. So similar turnout. The other point I'd make is there's been a few people that say that there's a contradiction in the survey results. I don't want a referendum, but I don't want cuts. And I would argue that's not what it says, because for me, I took the survey as well, and I said I don't want any of these cuts either. It doesn't mean there's not cuts that can be made. There's a few board members who weren't on the board, so I'll remind them from last year. On election night, we took a vote to pass a spending item for $600,000 for new route. And what I said was at the time, hey, we can talk about the merits. That's another whole discussion. But it's election night. We just asked the public for a referendum. We don't have the results back. And 6-1, with me being the one, said, nope, let's spend that, right? So what I'm saying is, I only say that to say it's possible for somebody to say, I don't want these cuts, but they would still support some cuts. So I just, and that's where I'll end at 9, kind of regardless.
Board Member Nichols?
I'm gonna stay with 9. I mean, I fully understand the additional money that would be nice to have going forward, but I think listening to the public, and now we have 3 years to prove to the public that we can do the things we said we're going to do in this example question, focusing on academic achievement and absenteeism and all those things, to turn, to make those report cards amazingly better. And then that will, we're going to leave the public with a positive attitude if we do that, which would allow us to ask down the road for future referendums to fund the district. So I'm sticking with 9.
Yeah, if we would have been a 3-star district, we'd still be having the same conversation. If we were a 4-star district, we would still be having the same conversation. So automatically, just if student achievement happened, we still have the same financial situation if all the kids were the highest achieving right now. That might motivate people, but to go vote, but that isn't, in my opinion, that's not a changer of this whole scenario. If we had a state championship football team or state championship basketball team, we're still in the same financial situation. So the practicality for me in this is working with 7 people. We have to achieve a consensus. There's 4 and then there's 3. And the best thing about it is, you know, I do like working with the 7 of you, with the 6 of you. We're going to continue to work together collaboratively. We'll talk about it and then we got to go. But the issue is, just like with in the teacher salary, what was offered is what was offered because that's where 4 people agreed. So we got to be able to move forward with 4. And it takes us a while to get there sometimes, but, you know, I know everything's been thorough and everyone has had their piece. So that's why I'm not changing, because this is where this is where we're at, and everybody is going to support a referendum, even if you wanted more. So I'm staying at 4. I'm staying at the 9. Greg Schneider, you're the last one because you came in there last. You want to move to a different place?
No, I'll stay where I am.
Okay. Go ahead, Megan. You going to move over?
No, but what I wanted to add, but okay, so like we have some wonderful board collective commitments. And just like Dr. Garrison, when he was sort of summarizing back earlier, pointed out, there's a lot of value in what everybody has shared. So I just want to like kind of lift up the collective commitment that we had to kind of support the consensus or the majority. So in the spirit of that, while I am still unchanged in my personal opinion, some positives that I see for 9 is that we just got this beautiful facilities study, which is just a fantastic demonstration of the functionality and effort that our administration and everybody that we're working with has put into sort of like the view of the sustainability of our district and its facilities. And I think that I just want to make sure I have the right number. Is it $6.11? Where 9 projects us to land, gives us a lot of wiggle room that's also respectful to like property taxpayers in terms of room to maybe look at a capital referendum sooner rather than later, which is a positive. While even though it's not like kind of where I'm personally at, I see that as a positive going forward. And I do, just because Brian brought it up again, want to say, yeah, I mean, the survey said a lot of things, you know, and the survey did say 9. And I think all of us do want to demonstrate. And while some of us have a different interpretation of what that survey is telling us, like 9 does help us be responsive in a very concrete way to at least a component of what that survey data is. So I just wanted, you know, in the spirit of consensus building, while no, I'm absolutely still at 12.8, I do see a lot of positives going forward if seemingly that we are unchanged in our 9 majority.
Just a reminder also too that, you know, in our strategic plan, our goal is to stabilize district finances. So a pass 9 is better than a failed 12.
If I may, yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. So, Board Member Johnson, yeah, I really like your approach to kind of mathing the math out there. What I will say though is that like if we did do like a 10.6 or 10.8, it's almost like a lose-lose though, because then it's like it's not going to be what our kids need, and it's also not what the respondents asked for. So I just wanted to let you know I really appreciate how you thought about it. That's just like kind of like another take on that too, though.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Well, and the other reason I'm comfortable with the 10 is if you look at the distribution of the responses, a 10 is I would be very comfortable in saying with a strong question, a specific question that says this is what we're doing with the money, I think a 10 would pass as well.
Yeah, I fully agree.
I'm gonna layer this on, and then we're gonna move out of this discussion. So with 9, we're still going to have to make some cuts. So when we look at the calendar, Dr. Garrison and Mr. Chady will bring to us, like, there's a time in the year where those things will happen. If you think about when we went to the budget, you know, the state did what it did and we were able to access those funds. But we didn't have to send them back and say, hey, find this $10 million worth of cuts. There's a set of different questions that we as board members have to ask of the administration so that we can do some other things. They're going to do the work. They're going to present it to us. But like, if our goal is to highly compensate teachers, then where are we cutting from to make that happen? So the priorities that we're going to set, how are we going to fund them? Because we're going to have the numbers that we have. And that's the work that we as a board have to do, is figure out what do we want to spend money on. And we'll ask Dr. Garrison, how do you run the district? And he'll tell us. And people got to, you know, he'll give us those spaces. All right. So we're going to move forward then. That's Dr. Garrison, when we see this again, what do we have to do?
So, 2 parts of this is, of course, you know, $9 million. Of course, the second part is, I think, you know, the board does have to make a decision on non-recurring or recurring. That's the other part. I think is a little, that could be a little quicker in the thought, based off of our conversation with Ms. Chady that we just had at the podium around recurring versus non-recurring. We never pitched out the recurring conversation. We pitched out the non-recurring conversation. And so knowing that those are much harder to, you know, move forward over forever thought processes. And so we pitched a non-recurring 3-year thought. And so the board does have to, you know, give us the go around. Do you want the 3-year or do you want, you know, 2-year? Or do you want the 1 year? I mean, it's the 3, 2, or 1 at this point.
So I think this is important. Last year when we were 6-1, it was a difference of like how we wanted to be the years to be. So everyone can weigh in again on recurring or non-recurring.
Oh,
3-year non-recurring.
same.
3-year non-recurring.
3-year non-recurring.
3-year non-recurring.
Look at that. See, that's what we do. Oh, Tia, you said 3-year non-recurring. Yep. All right, 3-year non-recurring. $9 million. 3-year non-recurring.
Okay, and so that gives us kind of the direction that we need to, you know, formulate a question. The next part of this thought would be, of course, it has to go to resolution. And naturally, next week on the 16th, we'll bring this back to you after we vet it through, after we vet the thought here through legal. They will, you know, of course, give us information back and forth around if does this work, does it not work. And then, of course, that language will be presented to you all on Tuesday for a final vote to go to, you know, to go to referendum.
Just a quick question. Do we need to have a vote here or is consensus sufficient?
So
We'll vote on it later.
We could vote, but we need to get it vetted through legal. We have to get this part vetted through legal first.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, we're on the 3A. Let's see here. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education in a closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C, relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. And Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. Is there a
Second.
motion?
Oh, sorry, I'm so moved.
Second.
That is, Megan Miller and then, Amy Levy the second. Is there any discussion? All right, Mrs. Show, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Oh. Hugh Johnson. Sorry. Brian Nichols.
Aye.
Brian Anderson.
Aye.
Megan Miller.
Aye.
Amy Levy. Aye. Greg Schneider.
Aye.
And Sean Levy.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, we'll be in closed session. We'll be adjourning from closed session also.